To present Austin Faith Dialogue, brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries. In the weeks ahead, you will see these and other programs by various denominations. Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program at the crossroads of religion and life, a series highlighting the cultural and social interaction between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTVC. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
Every day in Austin, children are placed in the care of surrogate parents. These children are removed from their birth parents when the parents abuse or neglect them, or when a parent dies. Who will care for these children? The scriptures of the Jewish and Christian faith expect the covenant people of God to respond to the needs of orphans. Hello, I'm Valerie Bridgman Davis, co-pastor of B'nai Full Community Church, and your host for this edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. Today, 3 members of our community who are active in the caring of children join us. Please welcome my guest, Rita Powell, Austin Area Director of Lutheran Social Service of Texas, Mark Tennant, a former foster care child and now Vice President of the Bear Foundation, and Sister Mary Williams Sullivan, Administrator from Marywood of the Catholic Diocese of Austin. I'm so glad, I said earlier, blessed that the 3 of you have decided to join us today. I should tell people that we've already had a lively conversation over this subject, and we'll just kind of regurgitate what we've already talked about. I found out that this really is a passion for all of us, and I'm really glad that we're going to have a chance to talk about it today. I want to start with you, Mark, because people are probably saying former foster child, and talk to us a little bit about what it is you do, how you yourself was a foster child.
Well, I entered the foster care system back in 1972. I was 11 years of age and had been a result of a broken home where Mom and Dad aspired that they could have lives better apart from one another, and it just turned out the opposite for my mom. And Mom met a man and moved into our home and was in our home, I guess even several years beyond the time that I had left. And he was a nice man, as I said earlier, when he was sober, but 99% of the time he was drunk. And so for about 2.5 years lived in a great deal of fear and violence. I remember as an 11-year-old child sitting in the living room watching I Love Lucy and Gunsmoke. They just followed in sequence every night. And recall sitting on the couch, and this gentleman would always come in the back door drunk, and things would begin to be thrown. Mom would begin to get into a scuffle with him, and our kids were at threat. And I recall taking a knife many times to bed with me, fearing that I'd have to protect myself. Black iron skillets, I don't see much of them around anymore today, but those big heavy ones.
Yeah.
I would take them for fear that if he came after me, I'd need to knock him out. And while I was watching Gunsmoke and I Love Lucy, jumping through the living room window with the drapes over my head, planning how I could escape out of the living room with the drapes protecting my eyes from the glass. These are the kind of things that an 11-year-old needn't think of. And yet today, I would say there's a great deal more abuse that kids endure more than I. But I lived like that for some time, and finally it got the best of me. And virtually had what they would call a nervous breakdown in school, and lost control of my emotions, my bodily functions, and ran to the school nurse and just spilled out my guts of the previous 2 years of my life. And I'm very thankful for that school nurse today. Remember her name, Nurse Howard, who took an interest and was willing at that time, unlike many today, to report abuse and to say this child needs help. And I have to say that when I spilled my guts, the intention was if I spill my guts, they'll go arrest this man, and then I can go home and live peacefully. But it was never that way. I was never home from that point on. And it seemed to be a tragedy at that time, but looking back now, I can see that the Lord's hand was on my life. And I was blessed by the ministry of the Bear Foundation, which brings me here tonight. Now, having gone into the Bear Foundation, a Christian agency developing foster homes for children going in as an abused child, on the brink of delinquency even, and now returning to them as a vice president, giving glory to the Lord because he did the work, but giving also honor to the Bear Foundation because they stuck by me for 6 years. Had a committed staff and committed family who was
And you
willing to
were
work with
in
me.
how many different homes?
I was in 3 foster homes through a 6-year period. The first one for 30 days, the second one for a little over a year, and then the remainder in the home that was most effective in dealing with me.
Yeah. You know, it occurs to me that we have not described what foster care or alternative family means or is. Either one of you, either Sister Mary or Rita, you want to tell us about that?
Well, actually, I guess I would describe it as temporary care to provide the nurturance that a child needs before a permanent decision can be made, or permanent placement or permanent home can be provided either in the biological family or with an adoptive parent.
One of the things, too, that foster care, a child enters foster care like you did, Mark, after a great deal of trauma in their life. And so their whole ability to relate to adults has already been injured, especially for teenagers and children like that. But the whole responsibility, the whole ability to nurture, some parents really don't have because of their personal problems. And it really is important that a child have security. And security isn't material things. It's a sense of being wanted, loved, and cared for. And foster care really does provide that. A great deal of credit needs to go to foster parents and foster families, because it's never just a foster mother. A family has to encompass that child, whether it's an infant or a teenager. And those families open their arms and extend themselves to accept another person for nurturing that isn't by birth part of their family or who won't continue to be part of their family afterward. So I give a great deal of credit to people who take that mission, that apostolate, that service of foster care, because they do a great service to children and to society.
I agree with you completely, and I think just as Mark was describing to us and the problems that he had at his biological home that came with him into foster care, and he had to deal with many of those things, he remembers a lot of what happened to him. We know and work with kids who do not remember, but who had the experience and therefore don't really understand even their own acting out. And yet foster parents are also having to deal with this, where you don't see the wounds quite as clearly, but they're there.
Marywood deals primarily with infants, and we don't have to say, well, when a child is 6 or 7, then they'll remember this trauma. Those first days for an infant are so extremely important in terms of the bonding and the nurturing, even such things as formulas and response to crying. We have one foster family who has had 310 babies. Can you imagine starting 310 new infants out? And they do it with so...
No, I can't.
They do it with so much love and so much care. And when the baby is brought for placement in adoption, they always cry. And I just think of how heroic they are, because they do bond with those babies, and the babies show the nurturing. And so good foster families, good foster care, who are willing to invest 100% in children, and knowing that this child will be placed, but that this child has an experience of being loved. That's an invaluable heritage.
Now, each of you come to the agencies you are involved with from a very deep sense, from what I understand, call and commitment, Christian commitment. Either one of you can jump in here, and I'm going to let Mark get a word in about that. Just talk about the ministry that this provides.
Well, ministry is a great deal of emphasis. There's a great deal of emphasis placed on ministry within our agency. We're meeting the kids' social needs, educational needs, family needs, and all of those things. But beyond that, we feel that there's a spiritual element.
Let me back you up and describe for us the Bear Foundation, because it's very distinctively Christian.
Okay, we define ourselves as a Christian agency embracing a multitude of denominations, people of faith. primarily recruiting Christian families, prescribing to Christian principles, where Christ is Lord in their home. And beyond that, by maintaining that family lifestyle for the foster children, the agency itself and staff and in operation comes from a very strong Christian perspective. We thank the Lord that we have the knowledge that's given to us through education, through books, through psychologicals and so forth, but we don't believe that's the answer in and of itself, and that when we've exhausted all the resources and perhaps come to the end that we've done all that we can do with these kids, then we're going to pray. And we're going to seek the Lord's wisdom on how we can minister to these kids. And so it goes beyond just reading and knowing about the kids. We're interested in the spiritual element, how we can minister to their needs.
Right. And Rita,
I guess for me it's a deep sense of commitment, that it truly is communities that raise children. We truly are all part of a family, God's family on this earth, and therefore we have some responsibility for one another. I feel strongly that it's true that no man is an island. I feel that we have families that really are very much isolated right now in trying to do an unbelievable job of raising children with no training, no one teaching them how to do that. And as community, as people within the community, we need to support that, because as a society, we are suffering, all of us, when that is not supported as it should be to rear children.
I want to push us into just how kids end up in the system, where the children you all deal with, your particular population of kids come from, and how that works. But I was just, floored when we were discussing how many kids are placed in alternative settings other than the birth family setting. And I think the figure was at least 400,000
statewide.
In Texas.
I think that would be a good estimate.
No, in Texas.
Just in Texas.
For me, when you said 400,000, I thought maybe you would say in this region, maybe.
Yeah.
Or I was hoping you'd say in the country, but 400,000 in Texas just floors me.
But your response, pardon me.
Go ahead.
It's naive. No, your response is that this is a catastrophe. And many times, for those children, this is a salvation.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
And so that it doesn't mean that there were 400,000 inadequate parents around someplace, or that these children are already marked. The 400,000 might be a whole lot more fortunate than the 800,000 who are in dysfunctional homes and high-stress situations. And there's no way for them. They don't have a Nurse Howard to go to and say, this is what's happening to me. And so that foster care is not, it's not a failure when a child goes into foster care. And I think we have to have that attitude that we talk about reuniting the family, and we need to do that. But caring for the children is only one side of it. The parents need care too. The parents need, because that's still their child, and there's such a sense of failure when that happens. And getting the child well cared for is extremely important. But also remember that that child is part of a fundamental family, and that family still exists for that child, even though that child does not see their parents maybe for many years.
Right.
That's their foundation. And there has to be either some closure where the parents can say, I cannot parent you, I love you, but that's it. But just this whole idea that legally a child is removed from a home and the parents have lost the child. I was in orphanage work years and years ago, and that's what happened. The child was taken from the home, and they longed for their natural parents. And the way we were protecting them from these people, they were these people. That was their flesh and blood. So I think we have to look at the foster care setting as the community intervention in strengthening family life, not destroying it.
Right. Well, and even on that wise, Mark, you were saying earlier when we were talking that there's a lot of family building among birth families and the foster families.
Ministering to the whole family, meeting the needs of not, as Sister Mary has said, not just the kids but the entire family, we really try to focus on. And we stress that even in our foster parent training, that we want them to have a caring attitude toward the biological family. I oftentimes ask the question, what do you think about the biological? Do you think they're scum of the earth, or do you think that perhaps as is the case, they've been victims themselves. So we try to embrace families who will in turn embrace the biological family, participate in the visitation of the kids with the family. Just this past Thanksgiving season, we've had a number of foster families welcome the biological family into their home, and they shared Thanksgiving meal together. We have biological families who are attending a church with the foster family from time to time. So it's important to us to build relationships with the biological family. We are not the enemy.
Right.
We want to see them reunited together, and we'll meet the needs of the kids, and more often than not, the Department of Human Services, in our case, is taking care of meeting the needs of the biological family with one common goal, bringing them together.
Well, Mark has mentioned Department of Human Services, DHS, and when you asked that question before, the three of us said, oh, wait a minute. You know, we came to the defense, if you will, of DHS. DHS is a legal body whose responsibility it is to take care of children who are in danger. And it's through the legal system that they get the children. It's either through the public school system, police, things like that. Many times, the placement with us of children is through the volunteer section. The parent themselves come in and say, I can't do this, or a grandparent or something like that. But DHS does a very essential service and needs to be really supported by the community and needs good foster families too. DHS has so much red tape. I worked for a public agency at one time in Dallas, and when I finished, I was going to write a book, 1001 Uses for Red Tape, because you get caught in that system, and that's what you're doing, and it's because the accountability. It's not that we're not accountable, but we're not accountable to the taxpayer the way they are. So I really think it's a merger, an interfacing with private agencies and state agencies, DHS, in fostering and helping children and families overcome huge victimization, as you say. And
I was getting ready to get there because I wanted Rita to say your population is not the public.
No, it is
not the public institution.
As Sister Mary was saying, we are a private agency, and normally the children or the infants really that would come to us for foster care would be there only for a few days, no more than a month probably, because of a young mother trying to make a decision about adoption or whether she was going to parent. So no, they do not come from the public sector. And again, DHS not only does take those children who come because of abuse or neglect, but they're required to.
Right.
And their system is very much overwhelmed with that number.
And Mark, in your case, all of the children that you get referred to you are through the public, through
That's
DHS.
right. We all of the kids that we currently serve now are from the Department of Human Services. I believe we may have one other child from individual juvenile probation departments. But we do service the public entities, DHS, Texas Youth Commission, MHMR, those kinds of agencies.
Say something, because we were talking about the fact that you are very upfront, a Christian agency, Bear Foundation is, very upfront, and you said the question always comes, how is it that you get this kind of public funding through DHS? Would you talk a little bit about?
And as I stated then, the question always has been, how can you as a Christian agency receive state dollars? And as we all agreed, I don't even know how to answer that. I don't know why, other than the fact that we are here for a common good and that we are meeting the needs of the community. Mm-hmm. And it's not profiting any particular religious denomination. The funding is going back into these kids, and we're just there. We're meeting the community's needs. The Department of Human Services needs us, Austin needs us, Texas needs us, and whatever capacity we can do that, we will do so. But it takes funding to do it.
Right.
And we have to remember that all social services were started usually under churches.
Yes.
For many, 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 many years, all services to families and health care and even education was done under private auspices. And when the government came in and took over and said, well, we're going to take care of this, now it has seen that they're overwhelmed. And we are coming around to the fact that the important thing is the child and who can service that child best.
Right.
What I was going to say was really follows with that is that it really takes both. It takes the public and the private sector to provide the services. And what I see is a very healthy kind of movement that has gone on for the last probably 10 years of public agencies utilizing private agencies and vice versa. Our foster care homes, for example, we have an agreement with DHS that they can utilize those homes if they need to. And I think there's agreements in a number of our different programs where we overlap or use one another in those services to provide the best care for the children.
You were talking about my reaction when I said 400,000, and that's probably a conservative estimate. But my reaction had to do with something we talked about earlier about what is with the increase of stress or whatever it is that is causing this just need to gather children under our wings in a different kind of way. And I think it was you, Rita, who said something about lack of community support. Would y'all talk a little bit about that as we run out of time here?
We talked about the economic factor having to do with it. Many stresses on families. Dad cannot work, mom cannot work. Those kinds of situations are, and overall, just the deterioration of the family unit. And I think coming from the private sector, they are able to see that more up front than I do, so maybe they could address that.
I think part of it too, and what we probably see a good bit, is very young parents who really have not had what the nurturing they need for themselves, much less the ability to carry on that nurturing to an infant. And when things start happening, when problems start occurring, the tolerance for those stressors is not nearly as great as it might need to be.
Yes.
And our whole societal emphasis has been away from the family. It hasn't really emphasized, and sadly to say, just look at budget allotments for one thing. Where do we put our emphasis? You know, it's frightening to think that we will pay so little for the education of children and so much to bail out S&Ls and that kind of thing. So that we as a society have really not valued children. In fact, during the 80s, the yuppies didn't want children. I mean, that was kind of the thing that went on. And we need to look and see that our greatest resource from God in our faith and in our country are children, individual children, not masses of children, because they're each created individually. And to respond to the need of individual children takes a great deal of focusing. And if the focus is only on the dollar, then we lose the focus on the child.
Well, Mark, I'm going to let you get your Treaty Oak statement in here.
It just proves our point. The value system not only, I don't want to incriminate Austin, but at this time when the papers were just full of abusive children, DHS is running out of money and so forth, we saw a whole lot of support going to contribute money to bronze the Treaty Oak. While at the same time, kids are being abused, shelters are full because foster homes can't be developed, caseworkers are having 30, 40 kids on their caseloads.
And services are being cut.
Services being cut, and just goes on and on and on while we're willing to dump money into a tree.
And part of it, too, is that it's a dichotomy. You know, the poor are the problem. If we have any problems, the poor are the problem. The other things where people make a mistake or the lack of ethics among legislators, that's not considered a problem. But the poor are automatically a problem, and looking at them as human beings, the way I feel our Lord looked at them, as human beings, and looks at us, because we all have poorness in it. We as a society need to refocus on that. But the hard thing is, there's not a bottom line. It's not an economic endeavor. It's more than that.
Yes.
I think we can look a lot at what Mark has told us, and what his story says is that there were people who cared. There was a community who cared.
That's a good segue, because we're running out of time, and I really want you to push our churches and our synagogues and our mosques and tell us what we really need to hear from you as prophets for our children.
That's right. Oh, please, please, open your home and your heart to foster care. It's a temporary thing, but it's the most unselfish thing, and your life will be enriched. Nobody really cares for a child and comes out less a person.
And I suppose what I think about is foster care is a direct commitment. It is not paying money so someone else can do it. It's doing it. It's
Yes.
getting in there and doing it.
It's investing love.
And Scripture says that children are a gift of the Lord.
Yes.
Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. And blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them.
That's right.
And we have parents that don't have children, and we have folks that are experiencing an empty nest, and I believe we can fill up their quivers again.
I think we can fill in this.
We need foster parents.
Would
to
you
just-
say, Mark, please, what you said about the need for churches to really take this to heart?
We have spoken in over 32 churches in the last 14 months and have effectively recruited 52 families that are serving right now 92 of our children. We have currently waiting 20 children to be placed with our agency, and we could be placing 25 or 30 if we had the resources. We need the churches to respond. It's the Christian community that I believe can make the most effective difference in touching people's lives. Whether you're Baptist, whether you're Pentecostal, whether you're Lutheran, or whether you're Catholic, if you have a heart for children and you have a heart for Christ, we can use you.
That's a good pitch for the Bear Foundation. Let's go, Mary Wood.
Well,
You got 30 seconds.
whatsoever you do to the least of mine, you do to me, and that's a very basic kind of thing. And the least that we respond to are the children, the parents, the individuals who come in, and we feel that the Lord takes that as done to him.
Yes, I think that's true. I think that's true what you said, too. Go ahead, Reese.
Well, I'm not going to quote scripture for you, but I do feel that one of the things that is very important for people to realize who are doing foster care, who are interested or in being adoptive parents for some of these children that may be placed for adoption, is that there's help available throughout that process of fostering or through adopting. And there's even a program now for post-adoption services through the state of Texas for children who have been placed in these homes.
Well, there's a lot we did not get to talk about. We didn't talk about the problem of finding foster care for ethnic children. We didn't talk about funding, the need for donations for the Bear Foundation. We didn't talk about the need for teaching our parents how to parent. We didn't talk about what the community can do to become a community again. So maybe I'll have you all back again some other time, and we can do this again and finish all these massive questions that we didn't get to. But as we come to the end of today's discussion, I really want to thank you, Rita Powell and Mark Tennant and Sister Mary, for being with us and for participating in this discussion and giving us the information you have given and sharing your heart and passion with us. On behalf of Austin Faith Dialogue, I'm Valerie Bridgman Davis, thanking you for watching and inviting you to join us next week at this same time. Peace to you.